So thank you for taking an hour of your lunchtime today to join me. First of all, just a little bit about myself. I have 30 years of experience in business ownership. I have done it all pretty much. I've had my own franchise. I've started a business from scratch, and I've also purchased a resale. So, I've been through the gamut of trying to decide what was best for me at that moment in my career path and for myself as well as my lifestyle and my family. So I know some of the questions and concerns that you might be going through at this moment in time if you're thinking about business ownership. I do have 6 years of experience working with a corporate franchise in training and operations, and that's how I came into franchising myself. My educational background is in training, instructional design, recruiting and retention strategies, which is very popular right now, of course, and franchise operations. So once again, thank you for being with us. What we're going to talk about today is just, first of all, why business ownership, what your options are, some of the risks and the rewards with those options, and then myths or facts surrounding franchising. And then your personal business model. How do we begin? What does that process really look like? So a little bit about FranNet. We are a 30-year-old international franchise consulting firm. We have the history and the experience of matching entrepreneurs to the right franchise. We have 100 locally based consultants at any given point in time in all major markets of the United States as well as Canada. And then how we come into contact with SCORE in the speaking engagement today. We have national partnerships with both SCORE and the SBDC. We use each other as referral partners, as resources, and we work very closely with industry experts to ensure that our clients have the tools that they need to succeed. My services are 100% free to you, the client. I get paid very similar to the way you might be familiar with how an executive recruiter might get paid or the way a real estate agent might get paid. We receive a referral fee from the franchisor in the event that there is a placement. So feel free to reach out. Our job, what we do at FranNet is we educate prospects on opportunities in business ownership, and then we offer the prospects choices so that they can make informed decisions. It will start with a pre-screening or a pre-qualification phone call. Usually folks will call me 15, 20 minutes just to chat a little bit about what I do and how I do it. And then we take the next steps from there. Our job, my job in particular, is not to sell you a franchise, it's to present the best options for you. So I'll talk a little bit more about the process toward the end of this presentation. But what I'd like to do, first of all, is just, I want you to imagine that you're the owner of a successful business. Take a deep breath and just imagine how your life would be better. So I'm sure you're on this call today because all of you are at some level in this process, right? You're either thinking about it, you've taken some first steps, you may have developed a business plan, you may have looked into some funding options, and you may have even looked into some franchises. But you've always had to ask yourself, why do I want to open my own business? What's in it for me, right? Do I want success, fulfillment, flexibility, independence? Do I want to feel like I have more control over my life and my destiny? Financial security. I don't want to worry about being laid off. And I want the opportunity to grow the business at my own pace and make money at the level that I'm imagining, right? Yet most people choose to work for someone else. Some concerns around that. Well, a job is safer than a business, or I'll wait until the economy is better. You might have money concerns, right? A business costs a lot of money to start and to operate it. I don't know where to find what I'm looking for. I don't know how to get started. I don't know how to do my due diligence and what my resources are. And then finally, you might have a question about your skill set. You know, running a business takes very specific talents and skills, and I'm not sure that I have that skill set. The risk perception with a job is that working for someone else is safe, yes, in the short term, but can you be sure your job is safe? Can performance determine security? Will you meet your long-term financial goals in retirement? So owning a business can be scary, but no one can take it away from you. You can't be downsized, transferred, or fired. You can grow the business at the pace you want, and the longer you own a business, the safer it becomes. And I'm sure, especially over the past 2 years, you've noticed that you've played by the rules, but the rules are constantly changing. Job security is a thing of the past, and income security is really a thing of the future. So, a lot of my clients, that's their biggest concern when they generally reach out to me. I want to feel secure. I want to feel like I'm in control of my own destiny and ultimately, my own retirement plan. They're concerned about how the economy can impact the business. You can lower the risk by looking for businesses with specific market characteristics. And I'm going to talk a lot about that right now. So whether you open your own business or whether you decide to franchise ultimately, there are recession resistant businesses and businesses in essential services that thrive in almost all economic conditions. So I've broken these up into three categories. You can see first, growing markets driven by demographics. So think senior care, right? So as the baby boomers continue to retire, and especially over the past 2 years with the pandemic, we have seen a lot of issues with senior care, right? So either people don't feel comfortable placing the elderly in the institution itself, they're not happy with it, or just the number of people that actually require the services. So I know with FranNet, we have quite a few businesses in our inventory that do cater to senior care, and very different, very specific, but very different types of services. Residential repairs and home modification, just a booming economy over the past 2 years. I have not talked to any business owner, whether it be franchise or otherwise, that have not done well. And this includes things both in and outside your home. So I just received a call in the month of someone locally that has their own lawn care service, for example. However, he really does not like to spend any more money, who does, in marketing than he needs to. So he said to me, I'd really like to scale my business, but I don't want additional territory. I don't want to keep driving around looking for more clients. What I'd really like to do is scale my business horizontally. So I want to say, okay, I'm already in their home doing their lawn care, but I noticed that many of them have pools. I'd like the pool service, or maybe I'd like their mosquito business, or maybe I want their gutters and their windows, et cetera, right? Because he's already paid for the cost of the client acquisition. So his marketing costs, his dollars are already being spent, and he wants to use his dollars more wisely. So it's great, right? Brilliant idea. Cleaning services are always great. I think if we did not know the difference between sanitation and disinfectant before, we certainly know it now. Both industrial cleaning as well as residential cleaning are popular services and have not gone away, especially as people are working more out of their homes. They have seen an increase that they spend their time there, and they want to make that space. They want to optimize that space to the best of their ability. So whether it be through cleaning services, whether it be through a modification in a garage or an office or a bedroom or whatever the kitchen, whatever the case might be. So those businesses have done very well. Then essential services. So the automotive, damage restoration, sign companies, and commercial cleaning are all very popular and have done very well. I'll give you one example of that. If you look at sign companies, for example, think of all the signage that has had to take place and still continues to take place as we evolve and change into the next pivot, for example. But during the past 2 or 3 years, it was, signs on stay 6 feet apart, or wear your masks, don't wear your masks, whatever the case might be, right? So that went from all the way into schools and grocery stores and businesses, restaurants, all the way to billboards. So very, very popular. They did very well. And then finally, businesses that help other small businesses. So as the Great Resignation takes place and continues to do so, people need different skill sets. So a lot of people are working at home. What does that look like, right? So now they're at home all day long and they need additional services. They don't have the same interactions that they did in the office, where they're going, they have, interactions all day, whether they be professional or personal. And so they need different skill sets or additional skill sets, right, to help them through that. So business coaching, Digital marketing, obviously, and I'm sure many of you, just bombarded with emails and LinkedIn's and whatnot that, podcasts, et cetera, have become really popular. Staffing and sales and employee training. So, the staffing companies, and we have quite a few in our inventory as well, they've done really well. So place any kind of placement service, right? Everyone's screaming for where are the employees? Where can I find them? How do I attract them and retain them? But even more, and just as important, if not more important, is that the employees that I currently have, how can I keep them? Just some really great creative ideas have emerged over the past 2 years. So, a lot surrounding those businesses. So just to give you an idea, and so once again, we have franchises in all of these areas, but it doesn't matter if you're starting your own business or if you're franchising. These are really good options just because they are recession resistant. So just to kind of sum this up, cars will still need maintenance. Homeowners still prefer to fix their homes rather than to move. Seniors will still need care. Essential businesses will still need support, such as signage, advertising, cleaning, and more. Mosquitoes aren't going away, and preventive sprays will still be needed. And then finally, children will need tutoring, even if it's virtual. So when you look at your business ownership, if you're thinking about purchasing a business or if you're starting a business, you have three options. You can either start a business from scratch, you can buy an existing business, or you can buy a franchise. They're your three options. So if we break these down, we can say, well, each one has advantages and disadvantages, right? So if I start a business from scratch, I have total control. I'm making all the decisions. There's room for creativity, definitely, when you start your own business. I don't have any predetermined rules. I'm making the rules. I can build a business plan generally from a passion. Generally, when people start a business from scratch, it's because they have a passion, whether it's, baking cookies or donuts or something like that, something in the food industry or a yoga industry or whatever the case might be. And there's a large upside to that, right? When you wake up in the morning and you're building something off of a passion, it gives you incentive to wake up. And then disadvantages. You must create your own systems. You may have limited financial options. There's generally a slower ramp up time, and there's a much higher failure rate. And that's just oftentimes 9 out of every 10 businesses fail. And oftentimes that failure rate is attributed to starting a business from scratch. When you buy an existing business, the advantages to that is that once again, you'll have total control. You generally will have cash flow. I assume if you're purchasing the business that they will show cash flow positive. There's an element of goodwill and trust there. You will have actual financials to base this on. So you'll have historical data, which is great. Resales are often attractive to lenders. So the borrowing capacity might be a little bit easier. You have an established market, you have a customer base, you generally have employees, and you have some, if not all, systems currently in place. And when I say systems, I mean, your marketing department, your operations, your hiring, staffing, payroll, inventory, et cetera. The disadvantages is that, once again, cash flow may be positive, it may not. There may be goodwill, there may be badwill. So there's an element of trust that's involved with a resale. It may be overpriced. There may be poor training and support. There may have been hidden seller motives. There may be employee defection, and there may be faulty systems. All of these things are correctable, of course, but when you come into it, there's just an element of goodwill that's associated with it that may or may not actually be the end result. And then finally, buying a franchise. Once again, advantages and disadvantage. With a franchise, you have a name recognition. So you're purchasing the license and the trademark and proven business systems. You'll have training and support, generally a lower failure rate, a lower cost. Generally, you put in more money at the beginning of a franchise system when you're purchasing, but as time goes on, especially over the course of 10 or 20 years, it just depends how long you're in this for, you will see that it is a lower cost at the end of the day. You will definitely have more financing options. because what you're doing when you go to your lender, the business plan's already in place. It's not something that you're developing from scratch. It's something that the franchisor will provide for you. Of course, you'll fill in what's, in your local market, what's specific for you. But generally, you'll have more options available to you. We'll talk a little bit more about the disclosure. All franchises will send you what is called an FDD, which is a franchise disclosure document. And they have to disclose, there's 23 items that they have to disclose fully to you. And then you have a franchise family. We call these the franchisees. So you have other people that you can validate with. You can call them up, excuse me. You can call them up and you can say, hey, how long have you had this franchise? Would you do it again if you had the choice? When did you reach your break even? How did you hire employees? Did you find it difficult? How did you retain your employees? Lots of questions, right? So that entire process is called validation. And it takes a fair amount of time to do enough due diligence to find the answers to the questions that are most important to you. The disadvantages of a franchise is that you have fewer industry options. And so for example, if you have a passion, whatever that passion is, and there are thousands and thousands of passions, right? With a franchise, you have to follow their operating system and you have to sell whatever that product or service is. You will have territory restrictions. You can only sell their products, as I mentioned, and then you have ongoing royalty payments. So let's just talk a little bit about what a franchise is. So by definition, a franchise is just simply a license to use the name and the trademarks, their products and their systems in exchange for the initial franchise fee and then ongoing royalties. So by definition, that's what a franchise is. And then how it's structured is the franchise headquarters is at the core, and that's called, they're called your franchisor. Then you have franchise operators, they're your franchisees. And then finally, you have your customer base. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about the FDD, which I just mentioned. The FDD is a government disclosure. It's called the Franchise Disclosure Document. And I've listed out the main things that they have to disclose, right? We follow the rules of the IFA, which is the International Franchise Association. And so we're bound by those rules, laws, and regulations. So the franchisor must disclose the amount of time they've been in business, their experiences, their bankruptcies, and their litigation, which obviously would be very important for you to know, along with costs. What is the total investment? So basically, you can break that investment down or those costs into the franchise fee, other fees, for example, fees with advertising, marketing, equipment, supplies, insurance, etc. The total working capital that you're going to need, generally, they'll give it to you for the first 3 months. They'll say, this is what these are your startup costs. This is the working capital that you're going to need for the first X amount of months. Generally, it's 3 months. Every now and then, it's a little bit longer than that, sometimes 5 or 6 months, but they're very specific about those numbers so that you know exactly what your borrowing capacity will need to be. And then finally, what the royalties are. What percentage are you paying back in exchange for those services? So the franchise contract, obligations for the franchisor and the franchisees. It will list your territory, which will have been discussed before. So when people call me, that they might say, hey, I'm looking to open blah, blah, blah in Lancaster or in York or in Reading or whatever the case might be. And I will call the franchisor first to make sure that they have that territory available. And then listing and contact information for the current and past franchisees so that you can actually contact them on your own and do the validation. They will also list their earnings claims, their financial statements, their manager's policies, renewal, termination, and transfer policies. So as part of your due diligence, it's not necessarily true with an independent business owner. Only franchising allows this type of extensive research utilizing past results. So when you're speaking with other franchisees, you're getting a really good feel for what the business is, how it's structured, what their strengths are, what their weaknesses are. Speaking about the franchisor, what the strengths and weaknesses are, and any other questions that you may have. So I'm going to test your knowledge a little bit. Steve, I don't know if you can, and I can see the chat as well. You can just type it in the chat. Is it a myth or a fact? So we're going to test your knowledge a little bit. So myth or fact, franchising is only fast food and retail. Is that a myth or a fact? You can just type it in the chat. So I see no, myth, myth. Okay. Uh-oh. And my screen froze. There we go. That's a myth. The fact is that there's over 3,600 different franchise companies in more than 90 different industries. There are over 900,000 operating units. Myth or fact? Franchises succeed because of the quality of the product. That's a myth. The fact is that it's all about business systems, right? It's their marketing, their sales, their operations, and their accounting. So I'm sure we can all think of examples that, well, I know some great, burger franchises, but I'm not sure that they necessarily have the best burgers. I just know that the burgers are there, right? And I know that they've always been there. And I know when I go to that burger joint, I know exactly what to expect. I know the toy that I'm going to get for my children and grandchildren, or whatever the case might be, right? So it's just a proven system. You know what the expectation is, and that expectation is the same every single time that you go there. So part of that really is when I talk about the systems in franchising, when you talk about marketing and you start to break this down, they will provide maybe a website for you, or they might provide some SEO for you. They might provide some, Google reviews. They'll show you how to market and advertise your particular business. So if it's not necessarily your strength, that you at least have some guidelines to work off of. Same with sales. They'll give you a proven sales process with operations, with accounting, with your IT department. They have whole departments generally that comprise anywhere from, if it's an emerging franchise, they might have 2 or 3 people in each department, to well-established franchises that, of course, those departments are very large. I know when I had my own business, I called my business partner at one time and I said, oh my gosh, you're really good at sales. I'm really good at marketing, but we're just beating our head against the wall, right? It's just this over and over and over again. There's just not enough hours in the day to do everything that we needed to do. When I got into franchising, I then called her back and I said, we are beating our head against the wall. So it's nice to know that those things exist. They've been tried and true, especially with established franchises. They've been around for a very long time and have had years to perfect these processes. Myth or fact? There are low-cost franchise opportunities. Not seeing too many responses on that. That's a fact. Oh, I see one. There we go. Okay, that's a fact. There are low cost, and once again, low cost is relative. So if you've gotten to the point where you've actually done your business plan and actually did your expenses and started to work through your own working capital of what it's going to take to open that business, you'll be very familiar with these costs. So when I look at brands distributed by average initial investment, and at the top, this is very important, there's no automatic correlation between the cost of the franchise and potential return. There are many affordable franchise concepts. So if you look at the pie chart, you can see under 50,000, 7%, between 50 and 100, 13%. A lot of them fall between 1 and 250. I would say that's a sweet spot for most of the clients that we work with. Generally, we ask that they have about 150, depending on the franchise, but again, that you have 150 in net worth. So in other words, this would be, and then 50,000 in liquid capital. So net worth would be things like your IRA, your savings, any retirement plans, et cetera. And it doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to use that money, but you're using that money as leverage when you go for your bank loan in order to qualify for the bank loan itself, or an SBA program or whatever lending option you would choose. And then between 250 and 500 is 26%. And then over that $500,000 mark is 28%. That's a general breakdown. Okay, when you're borrowing for your finance sources, people will say to me, well, I'm going to use X amount in my personal savings. I'm going to use X amount from my partner or friends or relatives. You might have an operating agreement or a partnership with more than one person and that you're all contributing partially or equally. It may be a home equity line of credit. It may be seller financing through a resale. It may be your 401k or your IRA. There are a lot of different programs. And what I do, part of my job is to help point you in the right direction so that you know what your funding options are and actually introduce you to partners of mine that may be able to help you with that process. There are many different lending options today. So SBA, right? SBA loans are very popular. So always a good place to start. I'd always start with your bank first. That's where you have that relationship. But then always an SBA loan. And then we also work with Benetrends and Guidant Financial and others just to, just so that you have a wide array of choices that you can speak with folks and decide, what your lending environment may look like. It changes constantly. Generally, I can tell you that when you're doing something that's not a brick and mortar, it's a little bit easier to finance. A brick and mortar is generally more expensive and takes a longer amount of time. And then, of course, you have issues sometimes with supply chain issues and the build out itself. So that process generally takes a little bit longer than something that you're running out of your house or something that you might need like a chuck and a truck type of environment. So you want to educate yourself to establish what your best funding options are, and I can definitely help you with that. So myth or fact, you don't need industry experience. Myth or fact? That's a fact. So franchisors want people who will use their system. They'll focus on being an owner. Generally, most of the time, not always, it's somebody that has some C-level corporate experience with either business or management skills, or with people and communication skills. They want to know that you're going to follow the process that they've set out in their systems. So you don't necessarily need experience. I was, telling Steve at the beginning of this, maybe some of you heard it, is that I worked in the health and wellness industry, and that's actually how I got started in franchising. And I would go on site and help them with their opening and their training and the whole 9 yards, and say, how in the world did two accountants ever decide to get into this industry and nothing about it? And they said, we worked with a franchise consultant, right? So at the end of the day, what we really want to try to focus in on is what type of business is going to be best for you, your family, your lifestyle, and really what you're looking to accomplish as a result of the purchase of the business. And so at that moment in time, I'm like, wow, this is definitely going to be my next career. This is very cool. I've been in corporate America. I've, had a couple different businesses, but going through that process and really honing in on what's going to work for you and make you happy at the end of the day and meet those goals is really what the job of a franchise consultant is. So a franchise is a great fit for you when it's a vehicle that can get you to your destination while meeting your lifestyle and financial goals. It's a way to reduce risk, and then a way to think about income security versus job security. That's the reasons that most people choose franchising. Royalties, it's an exchange, right? And so you're exchanging some profits in the long term for risk reduction in the short term. Um, Once I saw it royalties for what it is and what you're getting, it just never really bothered me. Having my own business and understanding exactly what was involved to try to get those systems up and running and the amount of money that I spent doing it versus having at least a corporate office or a corporate entity behind me saying, point me in the right direction. Can we do this? What's available? Can you show me this? How long is it going to be until I get A, B, C, D, E? What do you provide? What don't you provide? It gave me a structure. It gave me something to work off of rather than kind of shooting this in the dark. So for me personally, the royalty was nothing, right? I understand the cost behind it when you don't have it. So good franchisors, they do lose money in the short term, but in the long term, they make money. Once again, what you're getting is the experience, the simplicity, you're getting training and support. Generally, what happens in this process is that once someone contacts me and it would go through a business model, I'll meet with you a few times. I'll match you with franchises that I think might be a good fit based off of everything that you're telling me. And then you'll meet with the franchisors, you'll meet with a few of them and decide if it's something that you might want to consider. But part of their process is really walking you through what happens step 1, step 2, step 3. And part of that is really saying, okay, the training and support that you will receive as a franchise is the following. And part of that includes, generally, not always, some of them are still virtual, but most of them are on site. And so you'll go and you'll spend 1 to 5 days. I've seen it up to 2 weeks, but generally 1 to 5 days with a team of other people that have just purchased franchises so that you're working with them, you're all starting together, and you're all learning at the same time. Sometimes they'll have a manager or partner come with you so that you're both seeing and hearing the information at the same time. Once again, name recognition. You'll have a sales, marketing, and operational systems in place. And oftentimes they have that operational support will include a person that just works with you, right? So it's an operational manager, so to speak. When I worked for my franchise, part of my responsibility was just working, they called me the baby ops manager. And I would work with franchises from the day they signed their LOI, their letter of intent, all the way through when they reach their break even. So post opening, 6 to 12 months out, or whenever they reach their break even. So I worked with them weekly phone calls, but generally daily phone calls as they, got closer to their opening. And then finally, a culture of teamwork. It is a family. You do have people that you can reach out to, other people in corporate as well as your operation manager, as well as your trainer, and then obviously other franchisees as well. So it's a support system. So franchises are not all the same. You can say, okay, well, I want many units versus fewer units. So I'm working with a client now, and he was looking at, one territory, and then he's like, well, I don't want anyone in this area because I know people in all these areas. So maybe I really want to buy a 3-pack. I want to buy multiple units because I want to control those territories. And you wouldn't open them all at one time, right? So it'd be generally 1 year, and then you would, negotiate with the franchisor. Maybe, the first year you're opening your first, second year you open your second, third year you open your third. It's not all at one time. Do I prefer well-established franchises, or do I prefer something newer? Do I prefer something structured or more flexible? Do I want something expensive versus inexpensive? And remember, there's no automatic correlation between the cost of the franchise and the potential return. With franchising, you're in business for yourself, but not by yourself. And really, that is the meat and the potatoes of this, basically. There are other people that you can collaborate with, people that have come before you and have done it and have had both success and failure. So finding your perfect fit. So you have to ask yourself these questions. Am I willing to follow the franchisor system? Is it affordable? Is the risk level acceptable? And will I enjoy my business? What's important to you? So is it challenge, recognition, prestige, building equity for retirement, leaving a legacy, time for family and interests, independence and control, and financial security? So to get started, basically what I do when I speak with and I have my contact information at the end of this presentation. You can, contact me through phone, email, whatever your preference is, through LinkedIn. And I will speak with you, have a 15 to 20-minute conversation, and ask you to complete what we call our Entrepreneur Readiness Assessment. It is our proprietary profiling tool, and what we're measuring are your individual values, your buyer motives, and your core competencies. That contains a lot of information: how you like to receive information, how you like to give information, how you like to communicate, what your short and long-term goals are. And then from there, I speak with you on the phone and we kind of break it down, right? What's important. If you have a spouse, partner, et cetera, I ask that they join that first phone call and everyone thereafter. And the reason for that, oftentimes when I haven't done this, I'm working with one of the partners, and then we get so far in the process and there's pushback. And the reason there's pushback is because the other partner never felt that they were a part of it from the very start or didn't understand it. So it's better to be on the same page at the same time, so that as you go through the process, because it is a lot of work to make that decision for you, you have all the information that you need at the same time. So after I, put your profile together and we have an initial conversation, then I will send you a client bill of rights. And I won't go through all of this now. I can send it to you, but this is what you can expect as working with a franchise consultant at FranNet and working with me in particular. Just so you know, once again, you don't sign a contract. You can work with other franchise consultants as well from other industries. Almost all of my clients, not necessarily that they work with other consultants, but they get online, right? And then they'll call me and say, well, can we look at this franchise? And can we look at this? And sure, right? So it really just depends what you're looking for. We'll also look at your transferable skills. So we'll look at if you have a background in sales and marketing, customer service, operations, IT, HR, financial, et cetera. We'll look at those skill sets and see how they transfer. Conversely, I can also look at them. I have clients that say to me, I've done this for 40 years. I don't want to work in HR one more minute, right? So they're trying to get out and transfer into something else. And then we'll determine your business model. What's the length of time that you're looking to stay in this business, whether it be 1 year, 5, 10, 20 years or more. From there, I'll build a business model. And this generally takes 3 days because I'm speaking with franchisors as well to determine territory and see if you're a good fit. I'll have an initial conversation with them. But from your end, what I'm looking at is the questions I would ask. How many employees do you feel comfortable working with? What is your budget? What kind of business environment? Are you looking for something more professional? Or are you looking for something white collar, blue collar, et cetera? Right now, are you looking for something full-time or part-time? We do have some semi-absentee, what we call semi-absentee models. Generally, I would not recommend that you do this from the start. I think any business, even though they say that they're semi-absentee, it's your money, right? It's your dime. So at the end of the day, you want to make sure that you're getting in the business, you understand everything nuts to bolts, and then you can take a step back and say, okay, I want to hire a manager, I want to hire X number of employees, or whatever the case might be. You'll just have a much better feel for it. Number of units. Are you looking for something ultimately one or multiple units? And you may not know that at this point in time. The types of customers that you would like to see. Are you interested in a service or a product? Something new or something established? And when we talk, I'll tell you the pros and cons of both. And then room for growth and any other items that might be important to you. So I put all of this together in a business model, and then I make 3 recommendations, sometimes 4, but generally 3. 4 is a lot because you're going to be getting a lot of information from franchisors, from lending companies, et cetera. So it's a lot to go through, especially if you're currently working full time. And so this is right, you're doing it in between, you're doing it at night, doing it on weekends. And so it's just a lot. 3 is the maximum number of concepts that I would show you at one time. And then from there, you meet with the franchisor. You'll have a 1-hour phone call. They'll give you an overview of who they are, what they are, kind of like what I'm doing right now, only they're going to be much more specific, especially when it comes to numbers. And then I will also help you reach out to accountants. If you do not have one, I can make recommendations for you. I can introduce you to franchise attorneys. I would always recommend that when you receive your franchise disclosure document, that you run that by a franchise attorney, not your own personal attorney, because that's not their specialty generally. The franchise attorney can look at, it's a 300-page document. You'll have to read it. It's great bedtime reading. But I will tell you that, that franchise attorney can look at that and point out any red flag, automatically. And then, also lending companies, right? So they're the three general referral groups that I work with, but you will have many needs along the way. And so I'm kind of that broker. I broker that relationship with and for you. Suggested reading, depending on where you're at in the process, More Than Just French Fries is great. The E-Myth Revisited, and then Street Smart Franchising. If you could only read one, I would definitely recommend Street Smart Franchising. It's a great book. So, and then finally, this is just information. You can visit frannet.com. You can type in your zip code, and either my name or my partner's name, Tony Wagner, will come up. But you can take your profile either on your own. If you'd rather go through me, that's fine. Or if you'd rather go directly to the website, you can take the profile either way, whether you work with me or whether you don't. It provides a lot of really useful information for you that you'll find interesting. I'm the only one that would see your results, or Tony Wagner, she's my business partner. And then we would, call you, follow up and say, hey, would you like to discuss the results of your profile? And are you interested in discussing next steps in franchising? So first of all, thank you for your time. I really do appreciate you taking your lunch hour to do this. I left 15 minutes in case any of you have any questions. You can see my contact information here, kbowers@frannet.com, along with my telephone number, or like I mentioned before, you can go right to frannet.com. It's great to be local. I love the area. I live in Millersville myself, and too bad this is still virtual, but it's great. I cover the eastern part of Pennsylvania, Delaware, and the two southernmost counties in New Jersey, although virtually we can cover almost anywhere in the United States now, but to have an opportunity to work in the Lancaster area is great. So thank you all so much for your time. And does anyone have any questions?
If anybody has questions, you can use the chat box. I think there's one from Jim Brenner.
Hi, Jim. So does the franchisor disclose their tax returns? So as not so much their tax returns, but they have to disclose an earnings claim of all franchises, right? And so it's generally broken down into like into a PowerPoint presentation where you can see what their earnings claims were, but not to my knowledge as far as tax returns, no. Because you have to remember that the franchisor, I think what you're probably really looking for is the franchisee, right? Rather than the franchisor. And the franchisee does not have to disclose their tax returns to the franchisor. Did that answer your question, Jim? If a business owner wants to franchise their business, how do they go about doing it? Okay, that's a really good question. And so I work with a group that Frannet, me personally, I don't franchise businesses, but I work with someone who does. They're excellent. Reach out to me if you know anyone in this situation. They're some of the best in the business. They've been around for a very long time, and I can make an introduction for you.